Hello, everyone. Welcome. Sorry we were a few minutes late. I want to say hi to people from all over the world who are joining, some of you in the evening, some of you early morning. The first thing I want to mention is you'll see a little window with a quotation mark above your screen, the video screen. Please do not click that. It says, be part of the conversation. Click here, do not click here. In fact, click the X that takes that away. If you click that, you're going to go off to another place, and it won't be what we're hoping to design. So sorry about that. It's a Google thing that they put in. Anyway, here we are, and I want to introduce the panelists that are with us today. We have with us Mike Farley, who's teacher that you, I think you've seen this week, actually, was his classroom and his work in particular with integrating games for learning. We're gonna go around and say hello. Rosemary Evans, who is one of the MOOC instructors. She's here dialing in on her phone from the West Coast. Renato Carvalho, that you see there, is helping us coordinate the video session. So you may not hear words from him, but he is a colleague here at University of Toronto who comes originally from Brazil. I thought we could do is start this morning by having each of the three of us just say hello and remind who we are and kind of say a few words about what we've gotten from being part of the MOOC, and then we'll go to take your questions. And if you are having any trouble with the technical, feel free to just add things to the chat. If you have any questions in particular about the things we're talking about, please feel free to type them into the chat or to add new questions on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will take those questions as they come in. Whenever we look at some questions and we've talked about them, I'll probably archive them so we get them out of the way and we can keep looking at the list. Okay, so Mike, do you want to start us off as the teacher who was the focus video case and just remind us who you are, what you teach, and something about your experience in the MOOC?
Sure. So thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Mike Farley, and I've been teaching for 14 years now. I was 7 years in the Toronto board, and then I've been 7 years at University of Toronto schools with Rosemary. I mainly teach social studies and geography, and for the past 10 years I've become really interested in game-based learning. And I think that my participation in the MOOC was, the video segment was to look at, what are some of the trials and tribulations and successes that you can have in using game-based learning. And particularly looking at the game Fort McMoney, which is a game that I use with my grade 9s for the past couple of years. But it's great to be here. This is a fantastic forum here.
And Rosemary, do you want to introduce yourself? And
yes, I will, Jim. My name is Rosemary Evans, and I work with Mike. I'm the principal at University of Toronto Schools. UTS is a school in Toronto that's affiliated with U of T, and we're really fortunate because Jim has been doing research using our students and one of our classrooms for about 10 years. So hello to everyone.
Okay, so the purpose of this session, as you saw, we wanted to try something new, and we thought it might be fun to get the three of us, Rosemary and I, and any teachers that we could manage to talk out of their summers, however briefly, to get together and chat about questions that you contribute, and also to see if we can do this live, just because we love taking risks. And I, again, apologize for the technical issues getting us going. It's a bit tricky to push these video signals into embedded pages and this sort of thing. But we enjoyed reading the questions that you've put in so far. And if you see the page in the edX window, these questions are listed down the right-hand side, and we thought we'd let you kind of vote on what we would talk about. by clicking the heart button there, and that will up the number of votes. And we've had a short meeting earlier today to just kind of look over what's in here. We thought we would start with one that seems to be common to a few of these, which is related to group participation and motivation. So the number one question here has to do with encouraging learners who aren't motivated to participate. But related to that, the next one, how do you ensure success of collaborative work? How do you ensure all participants are engaged in the assigned task? So all three of those are kind of related, and we thought we would talk a bit about how to get groups going. Now, I'm going to let the other two talk first about this one. I can chime in at the end with my own experiences as a teacher or a researcher. But Rosemary, Mike, what are your personal experiences and thoughts about engaging all students, especially those that are kind of, not highly motivated to be part of it?
Do you want to start, Rosemary? Do you want to?
Okay, well, it's up to you, Mike. I am happy to. You can give it a go, and then maybe you can give examples.
Sure.
Having a bit of a background in cooperative learning has been a huge help in this area. There's two brothers, the Johnson brothers, and they suggested some great strategies that really, no matter whether you're working in a technological environment, an inquiry environment, whatever, it helps group work to work. And one of them, basic principles, is individual accountability toward a group task. And when you have that type of individual accountability, you can do it in all sorts of different ways. You can divide up tasks. One thing you can do in an inquiry is to divide up resources. So a student has the individual responsibility to gather information from a certain source. You can have them do something like interview a different person each. So that way, individual accountability is assured toward the group task. And it's a very basic principle, but it does work.
Right.
And then assessing them individually as well.
Right. Yeah, I would also add that a lot of meeting and communicating with the students as a teacher. So constantly sitting down with the groups, just checking in with them so you've got a good pulse on what's actually going on with the group, and you can troubleshoot at any point. And a lot of times it just takes having a discussion with the students who are a little less motivated just to see what's actually going on, and then you can course correct as the project is going through and see if there's other activities that you can get them involved with within the assignment, or somehow just figure out why they're not motivated or what's actually going on for them.
Yeah, and I'll add probably something all of us have experienced. When you have any group, and somebody mentioned this in one of their comments, it's almost always the case that some kid raises their hand and says, I'm doing all the work, or me and her are doing all the work, and these two aren't doing anything. And I think as teachers, we all have the knowledge that usually there's a different story from the other kid's perspective. They're not being allowed in to doing the work, or they don't find a meaningful way for them to contribute. Right. So I usually try to take the perspective of the ones being accused, even though it might be true that they're just not doing any work, but often, maybe even most often, it's the case that they're not doing work because they can't really find a good way to connect, and either the other two are just running out ahead of them, or not able to be good group coordinators. And so part of it is, to my experience, also enabling the group to work as a group. If you just hand them a group assignment and say, good luck with this, go organize yourselves and figure it out, there's a risk factor there that the kids won't be able to do it, and they'll get into these front seat, back seat relationships. So another trick that I've often used is to have very clear assignments for individuals or roles within the group. One person's the note taker, one person is the assigned to go find resources. If the task makes sense to have these subtasks, that's a way to make sure there's something for everyone to do. Otherwise, you end up needing to check in with each group and make sure they have a good process going. Any follow-ups to those ideas?
Yeah, no, those are great. Because there's ways you can spark that inner motivation of the students to get involved. I think, Rosemary, you're pointing to that, to really want students to actually want to do it themselves. And then I've also just recently have started using a little survey at the end of a project, and the students know this is going to be happening, but it's just using Google Forms where the students actually assess themselves and one another, and this is not done in a public forum, so only I'm seeing those responses. But at least the students know that there's going to be some accountability at the end where they can actually give their own take on how the group work was distributed and how that was completed. So for me, it's kind of a balance of both. It's that really sparking that inner motivation, so the students want to participate and want to carry an equal share of the load, but also they know that that there is going to be this evaluation or assessment at the end of it that is going to give some information about how much work they actually did.
Okay, so I've gone ahead and archived, meaning moved to the out of the voting ranks, all the comments and questions about ensuring group work and that everyone has a role. But just to close that discussion, or Rosemary might want one more word, is if you're gonna put group work into your curriculum design, really do think about the design. Really say, okay, this can't be a vague black box where I just hope kids kind of learn to work together well and succeed. You really need ways to think about what each kid will be doing, how their voice is being represented, a Google Doc or something that reveals their work so that you can see, this person did enter this, and a teacher could catch that this one's not adding something, or a wiki. But essentially to do the thinking about the group work beforehand. Otherwise, you're going to run into these problems and have to solve them, kind of afterward. So anticipating problems and heading them off is much easier than responding to them and correcting them.
Jim, I would just like to add that that's exactly my experience. It's the upfront planning, everything from group size to teaching the students the skills in advance. If they're younger students, sometimes you have to actually say to them, what does it look like and sound like if you're doing something like active listening, so that they can practice it and they know the target that they're aiming for in terms of their behavior. And then in addition to that, as Mike said, it's that constant feedback, both from the teacher and also from their peers.
Okay, well, listen, the theme of the week was diversity. Well, the theme of the week is enacting inquiry, and I'm going to say that for those of you who haven't really put this stuff into play in your classroom, it's very exciting, and no, Mike can attest to this. When you really go sort of live on stage with these activities, it's quite your heart rate goes up, and you're very excited to see what's actually going to happen. I've laid it all out. I've thought about it. I know what I want to have happen, but it's really hard to predict exactly how it's going to be in the room at the time when it's running. And obviously being in very close communication with your students so that you know them and they know you, and that's a big advantage. If you're the kind of teacher who beforehand had been mostly lecturing and not highly engaged, you might have a little bit more trouble reading where the students are. But no matter who you are, if you put one of these lessons in play, it's exciting and it's unpredictable, and that really is the theme of this week, is enactment. There were three main aspects to it. One of them was diversity and equity, and how, if we are trying to make these inquiry activities part of the student experience, how can we interpret that as responding to the diversity in the classroom. We have girls and boys. We have people from different ethnicities. We have people from different backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds. People with different strengths in terms of what they know and what they want to know. So there's a real advantage that inquiry offers to allowing that diversity, not only accommodating it, meaning that everyone gets to come from where they are. That's obviously a nice feature of inquiry, but also letting that become an advantage. So not just that I let you be student-centered and work from where you are, but that I get the benefit of your differences for me, and I get to have the different worldviews, opinions, or perspectives as part of my experience. That's a really tricky thing to achieve. It's a lot easier to just say everyone can work from where they are, and I'm handling the diversity, but leveraging the diversity and letting that become a strength of the design is even tougher. And there's a question here from Sergio. What do you really mean by student diversity? I think I just wanted to clarify that, and Julie asked a follow-up. That's what I mean by diversity. I mean really the kind of breadth of experience and interests that kids are bringing to the room. And I thought it might be fun to ask Mike and Rosemary to comment from their own perspective about how they've seen examples or responded in their own teaching to how to bring diversity in as a feature, not a bug.
Well, I guess I could start by saying, for me, looking at all the different interests of the students, their backgrounds, their experiences, their geographic roots, their cultural, religious roots, all of this can actually be wonderful to feed multiple perspectives. So I'm a social studies and history teacher, and so in my context, if the teacher recognizes this, I think then the teacher can leverage it. The other thing that I have found which really helps with motivation is that a student then can become an expert in a certain area because they have that knowledge. They may bring the knowledge of another part of the world. They may bring the knowledge of a different religious perspective, and giving them the opportunity to share that expertise certainly helps give them credibility and in the classroom and motivates them.
Right. Yeah, that's great, Rosemary. I totally agree with everything that you said, and I think that's a big part of it, is just really getting to know the students as much as you can, and drawing on their experience, to actually help, figure out where you're going to go in the course, and looking at their strengths, and there's a lot of things that they know about that as a teacher we don't really know that much about, and again, kind of just looking back at my own experience with the game-based learning, there's usually a group of students who know a lot more about games than I do, and they a lot of times they'll come to me with ideas or suggestions, and they're both girls, boys, all different backgrounds in that area, and it's amazing, what they can bring out, which I just have no idea about. So it really is, I think it is really kind of tapping into the rich resources of the students themselves in the classroom.
Jim, another area that I feel is part of the diversity is you'll have students with with learning differences. And sometimes you'll have a student whose strength may not be, for example, reading, but they're excellent at visual analysis. So if you give them, a set of paintings to analyze, and someone else does background reading from text, in that way they can also complement one another. It's not that you don't want the student who struggles with reading not to read, but at times they need to feel that they can really be the expert and that their strength is being recognized.
Right.
Yeah, and this is really hard when you have a large class. I think everyone knows that when you have 22, 22, even 24 or 5 kids, it's one thing. When you have 30, 35, it's another thing, and it's night and day in terms of your ability to do those kind of student-sensitive interactions. And if you're one of those teachers, especially in the U.S., that has 30, 35 students in your room, there obviously you'll need to rethink how you can give that much attention to students, because the time is limited. And again, inquiry can offer advantages here if you're thoughtful, planful, and if you can get these students if they're motivated and engaged. If they're not, and they're have real problems with attention, you're going to have to get a lot more structural and basically say, here, this is your assignment, you do this. Be a lot more sort of scripted in how you do the inquiry. But inquiry can offer an advantage to allowing students to get their own voice and to essentially interact more closely with their peers.
Jim, I think that also goes back to the design. If you can design the assignment for, say, a group of 4, whether you've got 32 students in your class or 20 students in your class, it is the same assignment, and then it is much more difficult for the teacher to do the feedback in a larger class. So trying to build in opportunities for peer feedback is really important.
Okay, well, I'm looking through the questions, and I'm trying again to archive the ones that we've looked at. So another one, a theme that I'm seeing here, and if you have immediate questions, oh yeah, here's one from Tracy. I have 40 students in my class. I usually group them in groups of 4. I feel that any more than 4, not everyone gets to participate. I totally agree, Tracy, and
Me too.
I usually prefer 3 even, which then you start getting so many groups that it's difficult. Is 6 people in a group too large? It's wonderful to see these questions coming in real time, because we can take them almost as part of a conversation. I just want to recognize that when you have these large classes, inquiry is tricky. And what Rosemary said, if you think hard about structuring it for small groups, we've tried another approach, which is almost like groups of groups. So in a class that I had this year, we had 75, and I was very, very scared about doing inquiry there. But what we did was divided it into 3 kind of special interest groups, essentially, and we did that with this MOOC as well. And we said, you're this third of the class is about this topic, and this third is about this focused topic, and this one is about this. And within those 3 special interest groups, we'll have smaller groups. So again, with the structuring and the kind of thinking, you can try to respond. One last thought, and I'll let my other 2 colleagues chime in. It's risky, and when you do these things with large groups or large classes, and it falls apart or it doesn't go the way you were hoping, it can be a real problem. And you talk about losing control of the class, and they stop essentially respecting that this kind of thing can ever really lead to real learning. And so you have to be extremely careful. And this was my advice in the video from this week, was to try out parts of it first. So if you like this idea of 3, like break them into 3 groups of 15, have one kind of very high level assignment for those 3 groups. Let them try on the identity. Just do it for half a period. In other words, kind of give them small doses and get them used to it, and phase it in, rather than trying to bring some grandiose orchestration online all at once. So that's my sympathy to those of you with large classes, and my sort of what strategies I can know about. How about you others?
I would say definitely pairs is the starting point, because when you can even have students work in pairs, then even if the class is really large, they get a chance to talk through and to work together to make meaning as they discuss. And then you can go from there to pairs of pairs, or something like a think, pair, share as another strategy or approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would echo what's been said about. I would probably say groups of 4 for me would be the biggest, maybe 5 at times. But if it's anything bigger than that, students can kind of hide out within that group. You know, you can just kind of be in the background a little bit. And also, if you're doing some type of project where the students are reporting back to the rest of the class, you know, the challenge is if you have too many groups, then that can just take too much class time in order to go through that. So it is a bit of a delicate balance, but I would say, you know, anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 would be the maximum.
Okay, I see assessment here. I think we talked a little bit about it in the first question. A couple more people have come on since then, and I think we have 71 now, which is neat. Welcome everyone if you have been joining. We're trusting the technology is working well. To refresh, there's 3 of us here in a panel, myself, Mike Farley, who's a UTS teacher, and Rosemary Evans, who's the principal at UTS and co-instructor of the MOOC. We're taking your questions live here, and it's pointed out in the chat stream, which is on the left, that this whole session will be recorded and posted for those of you, wider audience, who cannot be here live. But we were excited to try a live session, and it seems to be fun. We're looking at the text chats that come in and responding in real time to those. So if you have a thought about what we're saying now, feel free to type it in. Also, and you can add your questions and vote on your peers. Assessment is one that I see appearing, several of them below, and I just wanted to return to it because what I've noticed over the years is when you add inquiry into your course, the assessment load, the marking, Canada will use this term marking, it increases in some ways, and you can really bury yourself under assessment if you're not careful. On the other hand, there's many new opportunities for assessment that are brought in by inquiry. You suddenly have access to what your students are thinking. You have different types of information about what they're thinking. You have drawings, mappings, models, visualizations, peer communication. So there's different modes of information that you have. My caution for teachers is that this can flood you with information about your kids, and it can become almost overwhelming, even if you only have one section of students. But what if you, like many teachers, you have 5 or 6 sections of a class? You have to do this 6 times, and if you need, you know, even an hour or 2 hours for each section, that's suddenly 10 and 12 hours of assessment time. And if you're going to run a lesson for many days, which I personally advocate or suggest that is the best approach, you really can get overwhelmed. So I'd like to ask the question, kind of rephrasing some of the things I see here in the list of Rosemary and Mike about assessment, and you know, what is the balance between using this very now thick stream of information we're getting in real time? So suddenly I have to be aware of, I'm not lecturing for 45 minutes and hoping they get it, right? I'm now out on the floor and I'm learning, you know, every minute of what kids are thinking. What can you say about assessment, especially from the school practitioner perspective, where teachers are now enabled with greater resolution and more information, but now what do we do with all of that? Mike, what do you?
Mike, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can say that's probably one of the biggest pitfalls, I would say, was just getting too bogged down with data, getting too bogged down with assessment, and then, you know, getting behind on that, not getting that assessment back in a timely fashion. So I think it's important just to be quite selective about what you're actually going to assess. And for me, I think that's where the discussions with the students really comes in, because that, you know, in a way that is a type of assessment. You really just want to see that the students are progressing along, that there is some movement forward, and then just be a little more choosy about what you're actually going to formally assess. But you can take care of a lot of that, I think, just through more of the informal assessment and actually sitting down with the students and checking in and how things are going. But I do see that you know, especially for teachers who tend to be starting out, that tends to be, you know, one of the bigger pitfalls is just thinking that you need to spend, you know, most of your time marking and assessing things, and that it just becomes counterproductive. There's the law of diminishing returns at a certain point.
And just to build on what Mike was saying, I think one of the things is, again, the upfront planning. If you can, and I've watched Mike do this, so I can speak from experience, that he saved examples of students' work from the past. He actually used that work to help students with him co-construct rubrics, so that the language in the rubrics that outline what the expectations are at levels of performance has student language embedded, so the students really get and understand, and they've got real life examples. That way, as they're beginning to do their work and work toward it, they can do much more self-assessment. They can look and see, how close am I to meeting the standards? So I think that type of work really helps with clarifying the assessment and removing the load from the teacher in terms of marking.
Yeah, there are a couple of, you know, hidden, not so hidden resources for teachers to draw on, and one of them is obviously peers. We're using peers in this MOOC. You know, we did not have the time and the ability to go and look at everybody's designs each week. So we said, okay, let's get you to look at each other's designs. That has only so much that it can squeeze out of that sponge, but within your class you can work that resource. The other one, technology. So technology is the secret weapon of all of this inquiry. I think some of these ideas about inquiry have been around for many, many years and been actively explored by teachers, but the technology is starting to make it easier to get kids to add things and build on each other's ideas, to give comments, to put them into groups. I think this is where, as well, the kids are getting more fluent with the technologies, and they're more aware of these modes of interacting within software environments. So it's all becoming a little bit easier to convince students to get on and get to work, and that their work is going to be saved, and it's going to be, the teacher will send you feedback. So that's positives in this struggle. But I think the points Mike and Rosemary have made about deciding really what you're going to grade formally and what you're going to just try to give some feedback. You don't have to give feedback to every student every time. You can get the peers to do some of it. You can really give a holistic comment to their group work. And in my favorite is you do it then and there. So you get some of your feedback and assessment out of the way during class itself. As you're walking the room and you stop at this table group and you say, well, let me look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let me hear what you're doing. Oh, well, this is it. I'm not going to have time to mark this tonight, so I'm going to tell you right now. Listen, I'm not even going to write it. Go ahead.
I couldn't agree more on that. I would say, you know, kind of little short bursts of continual feedback is a lot better than trying to over-engineer it and get behind on it and not get it back. So I couldn't agree more with that. On the spot, kind of quick. Doesn't have to be that in depth. Doesn't have to be overly engineered. So that's a great point.
And even for the grading, you know, now with technology, Jim, teachers can embed comments, you know, right on in the student's work when it's submitted electronically, and that can really help. Students can help maintain a portfolio of their work, and when it comes time at the end of the term to actually determine the level of achievement, the teacher can look back and see to what extent the student has achieved the necessary outcomes or expectations at levels of performance by looking at that body of work, which is easy to access electronically.
Okay. Well, let's see. There's another one. I'm trying to find, distinct themes that are, especially if those are that are about the week, the enactment idea. I see one here, a couple that are about technology, and one of them is from Aline Rodriguez, who asks about using technology when the school does not provide technological support. There's other ones about mobile devices and bring their own devices that I think are related to this question, that our school students are still not allowed to bring or use mobile devices.
Well, I would starting on that one just by saying, Jim, I know that in all the schools I've been in recently, the initial initiative is to say no, and to say put the cell phones away. Don't bring. First of all, it was don't bring your cell phone to school. Then, of course, that we had to give in on. Then it was don't bring your cell phone out in class. And I think Mike might agree with me. We're finally moving away from that one too, and we're beginning to say, okay, how can we use this, in a constructive way in the classroom, because we can't fight it.
Right.
Well, that's interesting, right? That says the administration, because that's the voice of the principal there, right?
That's the voice of the principal.
The administration has to respond when the kids show up and their parents say we need them to have the phone because they won't be able to connect with the ride sharing, or they have to have the phone for something else, and the kids are depending on their phone now for so many things at secondary level. But here's the administrator saying, okay, now we're actually being reflective and responsive to that and recognizing that this is a potential curricular resource.
Right.
This was a big theme, a big moment for, I think, some of us in the leadership of this MOOC. We're trying to decide what would be the best 6 themes for a course like this. And deciding on mobiles for me was a moment of kind of insight that these really are a game changer. We now, as adults, all have them in our pockets, and we can't go without the map and the texting and the email and students are really going to be following suit, and they're going to have them even in middle school and high school for sure. How do we then let the teacher bring that into the formal discourse of learning? This is not just a distraction in the classroom. This is a central learning object. This is not a solved problem, right? There are teachers experimenting with this. There are teachers who are going to develop interesting solutions. There are some off-the-shelf things like the Nearpods and the Socratives. So to technology, for those of you who are asking about using technology without support or with less support, I want to say, be very careful. I've never really seen technology work well when there wasn't support for it in the school. Most schools do have some form of technology support, and I would encourage you to be extremely active in your school if possible. Talk to the principal, talk to tech support, tell them this is what I want to do. Tell them this is how I want to do it. Ask them what happens when this fails, and especially with the internet. If the internet is a problem, if your plan is to get everyone on the internet, you need to make sure that internet is working. And if the internet is spotty or buggy or unpredictable whether it will be here, or the kids can't get accounts, all this stuff, you really don't want to fight through that on your own. Excuse me, on your own. You really do need support, and if your school is not offering support, I think the first step will probably be, doesn't mean you can't use inquiry, by the way. You can do inquiry using paper and pencil quite nicely, but be very, very cautious about going completely on your own with questionable technology, because when it goes wrong and something doesn't work, you absolutely have to have a backup plan, or you're going to be making up a backup plan on the spot. And you can pretty much count on technology to have some problems. It's really hard to be perfect every single time. Mike, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I would say, well, just touching on what Rosemary was saying before, was this is, I think a number of schools now, or a number of school boards are going with a bring your own device model, and there's pros and cons to any setup, but what I really like about that, including the one we're going with at our school, is it's just the incredible fluidity of something like that. That students can just be using so many different devices, and there's just so many different options for what students can actually use. For me, there's always going to be students who are going to be goofing around or not, but the cost benefit of actually having students in the class have access to these powerful little computing devices, whether it's a tablet or a laptop or a smartphone, to me that far outweighs kind of any of the frustrations of having students going off topic. And in terms of the support, I couldn't agree with you more. There's nothing worse, especially in the earlier days when I was first started teaching, about 15 years ago. There was a lot more issues then in terms of just internet connectivity and things, and that caused a lot of headaches, I would say. So as much as you can get the admin on board, and I would say invite them into your class. Invite them into your class when things are going well and when things are not going well, just to show them what the reality is of using technology. And I've done both of those just to see real successes, but then also to show the admin the frustrations that I'm experiencing. And that usually, I think, when the admin can actually pick up on that, then they really, or might even, if you've got a tech department, have them come down while you're starting something you think there might be an issue, and you have a tech person in your school, they can actually come in and actually real-time troubleshoot, or even just see, well, this is what it's actually like when you've got 18 hands going up because the internet is down, or their logins are messed up, or just how chaotic that can be as a teacher. That usually gets things done pretty quickly.
Rosemary, any thoughts on technology?
I just put a comment in because I know it's still, I think it's good to reinforce to teachers that there also are times when it's okay to say, close your device, or put your device away for the next 10 minutes, and we're going to do something else. And it's just, sometimes I found that with technology, the teachers were so concerned about having the students use it, and that they had stopped actually with class management strategies, saying for the next, and if you give a timeline, I think it makes it totally doable that the students can comply. So it's sort of rethinking class management in a technology-rich environment.
That's very interesting. I'm reminded by one of my graduate students who uses the opportunity to talk to his own students. He's an instructor as well, and he's a PhD student in our program here at University of Toronto. He actually creates a moment with his own class where they negotiate what is the agreed on protocol for these phones in class, and they talk about whether it's okay to check your social media during class. They talk about how they're going to use the phones in class. So there is a kind of if you don't take it on head on with your students, it's going to be taken on around the edges.
That's right.
There are many of these things that you probably ought to make a list and say these are topics that need to be talked about. We're going to have these rubrics, like Rosemary mentioned, getting students involved in actually talking through how assessment will be done. Should I just assess whether you've said anything? What could be wrong with that? Well, maybe you just type nonsense, right? Maybe. So get the kids to say, well, it's more than just, it's more than just adding something. It has to be something deep. Now we're coming up toward the end. I know that all of the panelists have full calendars and things to get to, and I think probably many of the visitors do as well. Obviously, want to remind you there's another one of these that will be tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock East Coast time, and you're welcome to come to that. We hope we get as many or more people coming in. We will not have Rosemary, we will not have Mike, but we'll have Maria and Anand, 2 other teachers, so you're welcome to come back for that one. I'm just looking through the questions for any other ones that we can close on that we haven't touched on. I think language learners we've touched on through diversity and actually providing them with supports. Here's one, just a thought on teachers working in a department, teachers. Claudio adds, a teacher often does not work alone. How much is it important the collaboration with the department and school staff to design inquiry lessons? What are the elements that teachers, departments, and school staff may share in order to succeed? In my school, games and smartphones are not allowed, so we've just had about that one for a bit. But I think this is an interesting follow-up to some of the things we've been talking about, because it speaks to the need for communication within the school, communication within departments. Yes, it's true that teachers often are, and often prefer to be, very autonomous, but like Claudio says, we often do work with small groups of peers designing our courses, and these departments have, a nice way of helping shape the school's policy and the school's opinions about things. So I think it's a really important point to note, and there were several other comments and questions here about the politics of schooling and school reform, that it starts locally and it starts with you. It's true, but it can go out to your department. It can go out to your close peers in your school. Hopefully you have good working relationships with them, where you get to actually create a voice of more than just one. Mike and Rosemary, at UTS you have a fairly exceptional school. It's a public school, but it's a unique kind of laboratory school as well, and you have great teachers and great students, great administration. So you're an exemplary school. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the departments and the administration, and what advice you might have for teachers out there at large who can create voice and movement within their schools, and maybe departmental progress or sharing?
I think, Mike, I know one of the things I believe strongly in, and sometimes I think a few teachers find this frustrating, is I really believe that you get better curriculum when you create it collaboratively. And Jim's right, teachers are autonomous, but I think even if it's one person takes the lead and others provide feedback, it's a great approach to curriculum development, and technology provides some super tools for developing curricula collaboratively, and teachers can even work on it at home. They don't have to work on it just together in meetings, and so I would say there's just so many advantages, and that notion of a collaboratively developed curricula, I think, serves the students well.
Yeah, that's great, Rosemary. I just building on the technology piece, for example, in our department, the Canadian World Studies Department at UTS, we've moved a lot towards a Google Drive and Google Docs environment, the Google ecosystem, I guess you call it, and that's actually can be shared with the admin, and there might be some hesitation about from teachers about having too much transparency with the admin, about feeling like you're being watched, but if you've got a good relationship with your admin, which we do at UTS, then it's just more of a collaborative environment where it's not like when teachers close their door, they're kind of left to themselves to do whatever they want. There is much more of a sense of everybody being in the loop of what's actually going on. Not only the course teams, but the entire department and including the admin in that there's a really good sense. At any point, our admin liaison for our department, for example, can go in and see the units that we have, the lessons that we have, can give feedback on that, And then also not only the technology, but we have our department liaison come in and sit in our department meetings. I meet regularly with our admin liaison as well. So just a lot of fluid information, not only face-to-face and as a department, but also through technology, can just blow the doors off everything. You can actually you know, have prevent those silos, I think, from happening, which I think, Rosemary, you're pointing to, is you want to move away from that, because it is counterproductive in the long run.
Teachers have so many great ideas,
Yeah.
and it's one way to share them.
Yeah, just share everything. I think that's our mantra, is just share absolutely everything with the department, and just let people know what you're doing. It's amazing what can happen as a result of that.
Yeah, and that actually connects to the week 5 theme, which was user contributed content. But I included an aspect of knowledge community there, of learning community, and I think it's really important to point out that school, it could be a learning community. A teacher in at least in a department, science or arts, you can and the technology, the Google technology or any other technology, can really help support that kind of knowledge building or knowledge sharing if you have course designs, and they've always been in binders before, you know, or paper binders. It's a lot harder to tear those apart and add comments and maybe shuffle around the sequencing and have discussions about them. Whereas if they're in a virtual space, a wiki or a Google Doc, Google Drives, you can work more fluently with those media to develop lessons, to develop units, to develop assessments, to reflect on what's working. So I've been watching UTS over the years as they've moved from the paper binders to the virtual spaces, and I think a lot of schools will be doing that. Just as well, to point out the theme from the week. One of the third topics was the teacher community. So out there in the world, beyond this MOOC, there are these online spaces where teachers are gathering and they are sharing approaches that work. They are exchanging. They are highlighting their own good ideas. They are, you know, sharing links to apps and different resources. I think to do that, if one member of a school science department is actively engaged in that kind of a wider teacher community, in essence, that brings all of that knowledge, wider field knowledge, into the school. And so if within your school you see teachers that are kind of out there plugged into the wider discourse in their field and their local teaching area, grade level and topic level, that is a real positive for the entire school. And so I think that for those of you in the audience now, joining one of those groups and then making sure to raise and bring that, let that kind of influence what you're bringing back to your own department, your colleagues, maybe get them involved, is another opportunity. So Mike and Rosemary, do you want to say anything to say farewell to people and closing comments?
Thanks so much, everyone. It has been a great experience being involved in this MOOC, and I think the live session, I'm reading the chat, and it looks like for our next iteration of the MOOC, we'll have to see how we can use live chats to inform and add a bit of more excitement to the MOOC experience. And thanks to Mike for joining us on his holiday, and to Jim, and the whole MOOC team.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone for putting this together and for inviting me into the last part of this. It's a very rich environment, learning environment, and I guess thanks to all the participants for taking, you know, valuable time out of your busy schedules to be part of this, because it really is, everybody is adding to this in different ways, so you can feel that energy coming through for sure. So thanks very much for having me.
Okay, well, I think we should wrap up. We went a little bit later because we started a little bit later, but we should wrap this one up. We'll be back again tomorrow afternoon, at least I will, with a couple of new panelists, and you can return if you have questions unanswered. Please add questions to that other panel. You see it's another unit in edX, the next one to the right, and we'll we'll take those up. If we did not get to your questions here today, my apologies. It's hard to kind of be reading and talking at the same time, but we've tried to do what we best we could. The theme of the week is enactment. Enacting a MOOC is a really interesting experience, and it's been fun to watch as the participants give us input and feedback, and you can get a sense that we're also really learning how to do these events well. But the online live module has been a really interesting one experience for, I think, all of us, and a positive one as well. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you all online, and we'll see you tomorrow in another one of these. Rosemary, enjoy your break, and Mike, we'll see you.
Thank you, Jim. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.